Would you say that 99% of all movies today are garbage?
Franchise films went from being the occasional tentpole features.
Just what the hell is going on with modern CGI?
The visual effects industry is in a crisis.
Like there are no movie stars anymore.
To the dominant offering in theaters.
Over the last 13 years, anyone with even a drop of talent has been starved.
That studio malpractice.
The brutal working hours.
Big media companies discovered that projects attached to already established entities were far more financially successful than original ideas.
Burnt out.
Anthony Mackie isn't a movie star.
Unreasonable deadlines.
The Falcon is a movie star.
A flood of remakes, sequels, reboots, and franchises flooded into theaters.
And rampant burnout.
And discarded to the floor by studios.
In 2010, film columnists were already starting to get worried about franchise fatigue. At the same time, visual effects artists were trying to drum up support for unionization and overall more recognition in the films that they worked on. These discussions and debates have been ongoing for a long time. Even in 2010, movies were starting to rely more on visual effects than star power, and this has only increased since then, visual effects becoming a standard in nearly every widely released movie. It's becoming so normal that Daigle says that VFX are becoming less like the creation of a special effect, and more typically a standard practice of image construction. Take one look at any news these days about the visual effects industry, though, and it won't look so positive.
This summer, a wave of stories emerged that paint a picture of a looming disaster for visual effects houses across the world, and a punishing, vicious cycle for the artists within.
Cries of Disneyfication and franchise fatigue show that the creative side of the film industry is taking a backseat to profits, while the visual effects crisis shows that those doing the creative labor is as well. Mould writes that since the Industrial Revolution and the widespread adoption of capitalism as a system, creativity has become increasingly privatized. Operating much the same as specific production companies do, in fact, under capitalism, creative work is only valid if it is used to facilitate capital's expansion. The Disney and Marvel model especially prioritizes establishing a long-lasting brand as opposed to supporting workers long-term, evidenced by the fact that Disney can make more money on things like merchandise and theme parks, and so not worry too much about the actual IP, hence the less than perfect treatment of creatives. Mould in this chapter actually talks more about creativity outside the typically creative industries, for instance how more and more blue-collar workers are expected to find creative solutions to things like understaffing and underfunding. Sure sounds an awful lot like what is happening in actual creative industries, doesn't it? From visual effects to video games, under capitalism, all industries and workers boil down to how productive they can be for the reinforcement of capital and the status quo.
Many of the most profitable American game companies routinely lay off huge chunks of their staff, and it's part of a larger pattern of labor exploitation in the gaming industry.
Add to this the reliance on interpersonal competition between creatives, and you're left with firms, again in the case of visual effects for example, that are forced to compete with each other based on an artificial economy, an environment not competitive based on talent, but based on the pure monetary value. And this has a clear effect on the quality and originality of the films themselves. Because visual effects firms have to constantly move around, retool, reshape, and even reform, they rely on a steady flow of franchise films as opposed to risky new projects, hence why so many mainstream films are just that, large-scale, studio-run productions. Kidman makes a good point when she brings up the veneration of figures like Kevin Feige. What does it say about the system when a so-called corporate auteur is more well-known than, say, the visual effects studios his films rely on? Visual effects can have such a large impact on the message of a film, but as long as the creatives behind them continue being treated like a means to an end, then the originality will probably still suffer, and fans will continue to deride cinema for being unoriginal and having too much CG.
And when we think about a great movie, I mean, what do we think about? We think about story, we think about character. When the visual effects aren't perfect, we forgive it. So maybe the reason why people seem to think visual effects are ruining movies isn't really a problem with the visual effects. Maybe it's just a problem with the movies themselves.
When in reality, the problem lies with the system that employees, visual effects artists and beyond, operate in, as they are asked to do the same with and for less. Unionizing is on the rise, though, and those creatives willing to go to bat for their rights might be the superheroes that the industry needs to fight the battles between media corporations, guilds, and the workers on the front lines. And that's a movie I would watch.